Welcome back to Nerf Game Theory. I am Captain Xavier, and today I'm going to be talking about game complexity. Specifically, game mechanic complexity versus game scenario complexity, and how the two play off of each other, and how they can be balanced to make your game more enjoyable, but still a lot of fun. Really simple games are really easy to run. If it's just go to the field and fling foam at each other, no scenario, no real rules, that's very, very easy. But it tends to not be as enjoyable. It's not as doesn't have as much variety. Some people like the structure. They want to have a little bit more going on, and so you add some interesting rules or some scenarios to try to keep things interesting or make things more complex and enjoyable. And there is, of course, a huge variety. Again, you have the no rules, no scenario on one end, and on the other end you have things like Afterworlds and Dystopia Rising, where there is a manual of rules that could be hundreds of pages long, and the scenario is a story that's been built over years, very, very complicated. Those are the extremes. Most of your casual Nerf wars, which is kind of what these videos are more focusing on, are going to be somewhere in between. You're going to have some special rules, and you're going to be running some level of scenario. And the question is, how complex do you want your rules, and how complex do you want your scenarios? Personally, I favor simpler rule sets, simpler game mechanics, but more complex scenarios, or a larger variety of scenarios. That's not to say that I want completely bare bones where it's just blasters, tag people. No, I like things like shields and melee and different ammo types. But I try to keep it a little bit on the simpler side, in order to prevent the game mechanics from hindering the flow of play. If you have 12 different ammo types, and 4 different shield types, and 3 different melee types, and buffs and special abilities and all of this, you tend to have game stoppage for rules clarifications, especially if you've got a lot of younger or newer players who don't have the entire complex rule set memorized. Now you see this a fair amount in things like Afterworlds, when you've got newer players who are coming in and don't really know the rules, and when somebody uses an ability, they have to ask them what it does because they haven't gotten used to it and all of that. And in something like Afterworlds or Dystopia Rising, where the game is played for several days, 48 hours or more, and it's played over a huge area, having a 1-minute game stoppage in a localized 1-minute game stoppage to go over a rules clarification isn't particularly disruptive. It's disruptive to that one area, and obviously the veteran players would prefer it if the new players learned the rules so we didn't have to keep stopping the fight to explain things to them. But it's not as disruptive as, say, a similar scenario of a 1-minute rules clarification in a round that only lasts for 5 minutes and is in the middle of a public park and the whole game has to stop. That's the kind of scenario you want to avoid, in my opinion. Now, if your group is, a veteran group and you all know the rules backwards and forwards and you can play with more complex scenarios even in that setting, then go for it. But in my experience, from the events we held at Borst where we had people just walk up and we had to explain the rules to them, we wanted the rules to be simple enough that it only took a couple of minutes at most to explain the rules, and they weren't so complex that people were going to get confused. And anything that came up where there was a question of the rules, it took seconds for somebody to explain it. So if you've got a shield and somebody hits you with Mega and you don't remember that Mega pierces shields, it's as simple as the person who fired it going, "Hey, Mega pierces shields," and you go, "Oh, right," and that's it. That's the extent of the disruption. Whereas if you end up having something like, "Yeah, I hit you with a Mega Dart. Yeah, but I've got a +3 shield, so it ignores Mega Darts. Yeah, but I've got the boost that gives my Mega +2, so it still pierces shields. Oh, yeah, but I've got the personal shield that kicks in the one time," and so now you're going to be having more issues of that constantly coming up all over the battlefield and causing problems. So where you put your levels and how you do all of that is important, and you should figure it out. Figure out how complex you want your rules, and this is going to take experimentation. We went back and forth on various rules ideas at Fort Borst for a couple of years before we really settled into, we really like these mechanics. These mechanics work for us. They're simple, they're balanced, everyone enjoys them, they're easy to explain, they give enough variety that people are running weird loadouts because they can make a difference. Or the way we run our games, you can run a ridiculous loadout and still get tags and have fun and all of that. But that took a lot of time to balance. That wasn't something where we just sat down once, worked it out, and it was perfect the first try. No. There were lots of experimentation and discussions on the boards, and hey, I liked this, hey, we didn't like this, and we got feedback from the players, and eventually we worked one out. So simpler mechanics work better in my opinion. You can have some interesting stuff, but keep in mind that it could slow things down. I prefer to keep things more, if I really want things to be more interesting, writing really interesting scenarios. Or at least having a whole variety of scenarios that are different enough to keep people interested. If you just run Team Deathmatch over and over and over and over again, it doesn't matter how complex your rules are, that's still potentially going to get boring. Maybe not, depending on how complex you make your rules, but we tend to do things like, first we'll do 3-15s. So any loadout goes, you just go out there, you've got 3 lives, when you've been hit 3 times, you're out. The last person standing wins. That one is fun and silly, or we'll do it with pistols only, or crap blasters only, or, whatever, to keep that a little bit more interesting. We do things like capture the flag, plant the flag, control points, Titan Ball, MacGuffin gathering. Each one of those in and of themselves are not particularly complex. There's the one goal. But we have enough of them and we cycle through them that it adds enough complexity to keep things interesting. And we keep the rounds fairly short. And we rotate teams again, or we switch sides, or we switch to another type of scenario, and we keep things going back and forth, and it keeps things interesting. I've also heard of, and I've run a few really complex scenarios where there are multiple objectives that you're trying to complete. And sometimes they're multiple where you have to do 1, and then you can do 2, and then you can do 3, and then you can do 4. Other ones you can do them all at once, but both teams are trying to complete the same objectives, and you're going to get in each other's way, and if they complete this one, it makes it harder to complete that one, which, Again, complex scenarios can really make a game interesting, especially if you do them, it's a half hour long, 2 hours long, the whole day long, and there's lots and lots of scenarios, and you're constantly being given new quests and new missions. And what one team completes will then create an objective for the other team, and you can get really, really complicated with it. And then you're eventually you reach a point where you're into LARP world, and you're going to need lots of people to help run that, and so forth. Whereas multiple simple scenarios I can run by myself. I've helped, or with a minimum of help, 1 or 2 referees and people to help set things up. It can be run fairly smoothly. And again, tweaking your scenarios is something that you're almost certainly going to have to do to match your group. Younger kids are going to tend to like one scenario, or adults like this other scenario, or new players have more fun with these scenarios, where the veteran players like these scenarios. And you're gonna add little changes. We'll tweak this scenario so it's 6 minutes instead of 5 minutes, a 5-second respawn instead of a 4-second respawn, 10 seconds, rolling respawn, the number of objectives you have to complete, the order that you have to complete. It's going to go back and forth. Titan Ball took a couple of iterations until we really figured out the scenario that I use now, and that everywhere I have taken Titan Ball and introduced Titan Ball, everyone has enjoyed it. That wasn't the first draft, the one that I now consider the official sport of the auxiliary. It took a couple iterations. At first, you could only move a rocket by shooting it. You couldn't run with a loaded launcher. You could only fire it. So it was like Ultimate Frisbee, which is where I originally got the idea. And so you had to hopscotch the rocket. And that simply didn't work. We played 45 minutes, no one even got close to scoring. We also used to play to a certain number of points, and we unfortunately discovered that could start to take out, that could make a mission go 45 minutes long, where nobody could get that last point because we balanced the teams too well. So we started doing either fewer points or time limits. First team to get this many points, or whoever has the most many points after this much time. Something like that. That helped flesh out that scenario, and so that it really worked better. And now I've been able to take it to multiple places and go, here's how we play Titan Ball, and everyone has loved it. And that's the really rewarding thing about coming up with neat scenarios, is when you find that balance and everyone is raving about, oh man, that was so much fun, that was an absolute blast, we should do that again. Or you start the new war and you're like, okay, what scenario do you want to be in? And everyone goes, Titan Ball, let's do Titan Ball. And you're like, that's my scenario, I designed that. Woo-hoo-hoo. It feels really good, it's very rewarding. Similar with your rule sets, when you're tweaking rules and balancing rules and finally get the balance of game mechanics that everyone really enjoys, and it allows them to start doing interesting loadouts and really having a lot of variety on the battlefield, and little kids being with, you know, a single mega blaster can make the whole difference of a scenario. That's also very rewarding, but that takes time to get to, and you really need to work with your players, figure out what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying, ask for their feedback, watch the gameplay, see what's working, see what isn't working, and figure out how to dial that complexity to where it needs to be, whether it be the scenarios or the game mechanics. So there's my thought on game complexity. Next couple of videos are going to be on specific game mechanics. I'll be doing ammo types and shields and probably melee. And then I'll start talking about scenario specifics. What kind of scenarios, how to design a good scenario, what makes a good scenario. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for watching.